Hello, everyone. Welcome to our little afternoon session. Pretty much as a bit of housekeeping as these guys do, I want to tell you how we're going to run this session. We are hoping to have an informal conversation in front of you. We have our little coffee cups here. We are not going to have a very structured panel, so we don't know exactly what's going to come up. That's intentional. And we're just going to try to be four people who are in this industry, who love what they do, and who talk about everything that's coming. Think of it sort of like a second date kind of thing. We do have some notes in case it goes awkward. But to kick things off, I do want to show a video that will set the tone for how we're going to go about it. Can you roll?
Folks, we are here to make the fast food business faster. Many times we don't really know what to order, but there is a part of your body that always does.
Introducing Taste ID. Taste ID will revolutionize the way that your consumers consume.
With just one generous lick. Oh, sorry. There we go. Taste ID will create and order exactly the combo you would like to eat.
And apologies, there's just the one prototype, so you'll just feel free to share.
How do you know our customers will like it?
Like it? They're gonna lick it.
Nice.
Go ahead, lick it, Bob. It has an antivirus. You gotta lick it to get the French fries, Bob.
Come on, where's the Bob we saw last night at the hotel bar?
Get a technology partner that knows your business and your consumers. Globant, technology that really dares to delight.
So you can see we're a little bit irreverent. We're a company that loves technology, but loves being real about technology, not the hypes, not the crazy things, loves talking real stuff. I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Carolina Dolan Chandler, the Chief Digital Officer at this company. Been here 17 years, have done the craziest non-linear career you can imagine, and I genuinely get extremely excited about technology every day, and I'm going to let my panelists start introducing themselves.
Thank you very much, Carolina. I'm Sridhar Sudarsan. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at SparkCognition. We provide AI solutions for the industrial sector, so manufacturing, aerospace and defense, energy, retail are a few of the sectors that we focus on. Thank you very much for having me on this panel. And I've been in the industry for about 26 years and was previously one of the original creators of IBM's AI platform called Watson.
Well, you were very humble about it, just AI platform called Watson, but that was a pioneer. My name is Mangesh Patil. Thanks for having me on the panel. I'm the Chief Analytics Officer at HCA Healthcare. Now, many of you may be knowing our company from the local branch. So here in Austin, we are St. David Hospital System. In Dallas, we're Med City Dallas. But overall, between US and UK, we are close to 200 hospitals and about 2,300 ambulatory services and freestanding ERs. Again, I'm relatively new to healthcare. I have some physicians and my buddies sitting here from our, so they're going to correct me if I misstate anything from a clinical point of view. Prior to HCA, I worked for Disney for about 10 years, where I led Disney's innovation lab for first 5 years, and then Disney's AI/ML practice and platform. And then I have a software development background and a degree in engineering before that.
Thank you. My name is Diego Tártara. I'm the global CTO for this irreverent company that you just saw. Been with the company for 16 years, so I've done quite a few things. And I now overview the full spectrum of technologies and industries. So we have a super interesting crossover and information, general information about the different companies, their interests, especially with the renaissance of AI. So I'm eager to engage in these conversations to go deeper on that.
Why don't we start with that? What is exciting about AI? Why do we have, I think they said 1,500 panels here in South by about AI? Why? And why now?
Well, I will start with your ad. And as much as, maybe there's humor in it, but I won't be surprised 10 years from now, you actually have multi-sensory inputs on the phone, taste being one of them. Because if you
But
look at...
I hope we're not sharing it like that.
Well, I mean, it's inspirational. Let me just put it that way. It will get some great minds thinking, but our mind is trained on a very multi-sensory experience and natural intelligence. In spite of all the talk about Skynet coming someday, I think AI has a lot to catch up. It's trained on very basic elementary data, volumes of it, but I do think that probably we're still sort of early in that stage, but when it gets that full multi-sensory AI, then I would say it's a renaissance for AI.
One thing I would say is, I don't know, about 10 years out, might be a lot sooner than that, before the end of the decade probably. But I also believe that I think it's a trend that has grown steadily. So probably in another year or two, we may not be having sessions on AI. They're all going to be AI infused in my mind, in terms of when you talk about technology, you cannot talk about it without talking about some form of artificial intelligence that is infused within that. So I think even that the number has been growing steadily to a point where it's going to be so ubiquitous in every walk of what we do when we talk about technology, that you don't need to explicitly talk about AI. And I think we're getting closer and closer to that. So the number of sessions you describe is one testament to that. Another one is, 83% of the enterprises, according to a Forrester stat, are already using or experimenting with some kind of a generative AI technology. So to me, this is just a representation of that I think we're just beginning to see. So to me, that's how it's going to look like.
Definitely. I think one of the things that spiked the interest behind AI has to do with, we launched our AI studio 7 years ago. So the traditional way of doing something with AI was you have to have some quality data in certain occasions, most of them. You have to create or reuse a model. You had to train that model. Maybe you had to make corrections to the model as well. And then you would have something usable for that specific scenario. And it was great. Results were actually amazing, for the enterprise, for specific type of solutions, it was amazing. But the problem is it was a lengthy journey. I think that when Gen AI and specifically large language models came, the different thing was that they were pre-trained and they could actually help you right away. So it was so evident to see the power of that model, even if it was generalist, it was so evident that all of a sudden everyone was wondering about, what if I use this in my business? So the distance between what you already have and what you may need was actually much closer. And that made the whole thing. That, and I think that from a marketing perspective, opening that to everyone, such as, my mother accessing that, was expensive but brilliant.
My mother is still not using that, and I think she would freak out. She would freak out. But, I agree, the technology has improved a lot. But if you watched, I don't know if you had the chance to watch Amy's talk yesterday on Saturday. It was very interesting how she was talking about there's this FUD, right? There's this fear, uncertainty, and doubt going on that keeps executives kind of at bay from making the real investments that they need to make, right? Because there's revenue that you need to meet, there's markets that are uncertain, there's a whole lot of things going on, and the technology is so much in baby steps that some of them don't really know where to go. I don't know, how can we, what do you think about that? Do you see that? Or do you think that in some industries, in some cases, there's a difference, there's a ship shape?
So I think it's a great question, right? To me, if I look back over the last, let's say 9 years or so, from 2015 onwards, AI was very much equated to a data scientist, to a point where I think there was one of the years between 2015 and 2020, I don't remember exactly which year it was, that was voted as the hottest job in Time Magazine, I believe it was, right? And I think to me, that shows that it is only one aspect of AI that we are all looking at, which is data science, the science of AI. Now, the journey has evolved. And what I would say is that, in my role for the last 15 years or so now, I have been talking to a lot of executives across a variety of different industries around the use of AI, the value of AI, and the way that AI can solve these problems. So one of the things that I have seen is a fundamental shift, at least over the last 3 years, the beginning of this decade, in terms of where we're thinking differently, where it's not just about let's do a whole bunch of innovation projects and see what the science of AI can do. What are the cool things that AI can solve, which is great, but it doesn't scale. And when it doesn't scale, it doesn't solve a problem for an enterprise. If it doesn't solve a problem for an enterprise, it doesn't solve the problem for that executive, which means it's not a good sign overall. So having now gone through that cycle probably a few times as an industry, I think what we have seen is a fundamental shift to where the question is not what can AI do? It is really about I have this problem that I need to solve. I need to drop my cost by 40%. I need to improve productivity by 25%. I need to add more customers within the next year. And how is AI actually helping me to do that? Whether it is understanding vast streams of data, whether it is being able to apply supervised, unsupervised approaches of technology, whether it is rethinking the process that I need to follow in my enterprise to include the use of AI and the automation that I can get along with it. To me, that was what was missing before. So I think I've seen the conversation flip to where I start with the problem rather than I start with AI. And I think AI plays a critical role in that. So I think to me that is very encouraging in terms of how, as we continue to see the shift, the fear, the uncertainty is continuing to drop. And when we see more and more of these examples, I think you'll see that trend shift quite materially. So the questions that are being asked are now the right questions, which is the first step in the journey to use a large transformation in my mind.
Yeah, I actually, between the 2 points you guys made, you talked about sort of back in, say, and I have to say back in 2015, it feels like it was way back, but it was kind of locked up within the data science community. It was a sort of functions of data nerds to some point. And then Diego made a point about his mom now being able to use ChatGPT. That's a huge shift. Like, in last 5 years or last few years, it has caught the imagination of knowledge workers in other areas. And I'll give you actually, we have Dr. Stinnett sitting here, who is my partner in care. I wouldn't say crime, it's a noble profession, but he's a medical doctor who works with me in HCA, innovating, building technology with AI. If you go and check his LinkedIn profile, I'm sorry to send a bunch of requests to you, but it says prompt engineer, comma, MD.
No way.
Prompt engineer. And so I'm sure he writes, I'm teaching him some Python, but he's also prompt engineering and building AI systems. And I think we have just enabled by making AI accessible and programming in general accessible to so many people who are experts in their field. They don't have to hire software engineers to build cool widgets or the things that are helping them. And I think that's a big transformational potential. The other point you talked about, where this can lead us, I think there are huge benefits, especially when I look at it from a healthcare perspective. Now, maybe there are other industries where you may almost feel like generative AI is like a hammer looking for nails. And you may end up hitting the wrong nail. There's a possibility of that. But healthcare particularly, there have been these long-standing problems that haven't been solved, that are extremely data related, that are extremely information related. But we just didn't have technology to make use of that data up until this point. And so in healthcare, I would say this is a renaissance where now you can see that happening. In fact, whenever I look at the clinicians who work with us, they're hungry for use of AI. They see a very clear value. And there's like a very clear line of sight to the value in this domain. So very exciting.
I was super interested because of what you just mentioned, that the enterprise, we're seeing exactly the same. I mean, the enterprise now are thinking about their problems, and they know, I mean, there's no doubt about what AI can bring to the table. So it's all about, getting the right solution. AI is definitely can help me here, there. So that conversation is there. The place where I don't see that yet, at least at the speed I would like to, is when it comes to putting this in front of our clients. Like, can I shift my business model based on this new technology? Like, let's think about Amazon, right? Amazon has an interface and a way of interacting with their clients that has been pretty much the same for a long time. And there's a lot of AI that runs, behind recommendation engines, yada, yada, and that's great. But the way you interact with Amazon is mainly a search engine, right? And it goes through a ton of information. Now, having Gen AI capabilities and a large language model, I could actually switch to something that's much more appealing, smart, which is looking for something where you don't know the name, you need to fix a problem, so you can actually translate that to your user. Your consumer has a problem that needs to solve, and Amazon will help you and identify what are the items that can be a solution for that. Or a shopping list, right? You need a recipe, and it gives you a shopping list. That's appealing. I'm not seeing that going as fast as I was expecting. And it will happen. It will happen. So I think there's a super good opportunity, but there's also the FUD. It's super difficult because
FUD.
Exactly.
FUD.
Exactly.
I was gonna, if I may, that was a very interesting comment you made about, and I couldn't catch the name of your colleague.
Dr. Steinert and Dr.
Dr.
Dooley
Steiner,
sitting
yeah.
right there,
The prompt engineer, MD. I want to share one very quick anecdote. About a year ago, I was with my wife at one of the specialty doctors here in Austin, very good doctor, specialist. And it was interesting. We had a 30-minute appointment. For 25 minutes of that 30-minute appointment, and I'm not exaggerating, we were talking about regression analysis and studies that showed data and regression analysis proving certain diagnosis paths and certain treatment options that we should be considering. And it was very little about medical work. And it was interesting because obviously being a data and an AI nerd that I was, I had actually gone through some of those studies in the past, and I'd gone through them in probably a lot more depth from an statistical analysis perspective than from a medical perspective, obviously where I'm not an expert. But it was fascinating, and I didn't realize it at that time, but after the appointment was over, I was realizing, saying, well, maybe all I should have done is said, what is your medical opinion here, rather than debating and discussing the regression analysis. And it was fascinating to me. So, counter to you working in the industry here and helping the AI solution and technology and digital adoption within hospitals and the healthcare space, I think it's also happening within the doctor's offices on an every single day perspective. So it was very, very fascinating to me, how that whole conversation proceeded. So very inspiring, too.
I think it's happening everywhere. this is sort of a blind date, you guys can imagine. So I did a little bit of stalking on some of these guys. And Mangesh was in a conference not too long ago talking about AI and how it's being used sometimes in the two ends of, of a process. And at the same time, I was reading some stuff, and somebody was talking about how kids are developing their papers using AI, and then teachers are grading their papers using AI. And we're like, who's learning? Because that doesn't make any sense. But I think your view on that, I want you to talk about what your take is on the source of that connection between two pieces.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. That's a great question. I think it kind of goes back to my point about the hammer looking for nails. It's right now our attention is diverted from blockchain, and most of that has now got into AI for whatever reasons. Maybe blockchain will come back next year and it will get divided. But while there is that hype, you're going to see that to some extent, that we're going to try to apply AI to solve any problem. If we have time, I'll give you 3 examples from my last job where we probably should not have used AI. But I think there will be that to some extent. And it is important to do that responsibly, whichever path we take. And I just think that due diligence upfront in, okay, well, where AI can go wrong, or does this really need generative AI to solve this problem? Sometimes there is just good old traditional data science that you can apply, decision tree that are a lot more explainable, that can still give you a much better result. That may not be, say, as glamorous of a demo, but that's probably a lot more explainable and applicable, relevant.
But it goes back to the ads. Sometimes we see people trying to go to the latest tech without really understanding whether that is what they need to use. It's really, I don't know, it's really dumb to me, because at the end of the day, you're wasting money, you're wasting effort, you're wasting a lot of things.
Well, so you asked a question earlier about students and teachers and papers and who is learning. I think learning is fundamentally being reinvented.
Oh yeah, this is an interesting topic.
Think about, right? I think it's not a hidden fact that every single job is going to get redefined over the next decade, if not sooner. I think about several jobs, let's say about 60% jobs, if one of the I think it was Peter Demar, and vice president of Gartner Research, said that every job is going to get redefined. Many jobs are going to get changed, are going to sort of evolve. So if we think about that, the things that we're doing right now is likely not going to be anything like what we're doing, even a few years from now. So take the example of what you said. If we circle back, let's say, I don't know exactly when it was, but whenever the calculator was invented, and when the calculator was allowed or not allowed at an exam, when arithmetic skills are being taught to students on how to count and how to add and how to subtract and do basic math, which becomes the fundamentals for a lot of things, and at some point, it was realized that, well, if you have calculators, why do I need to do that count? And that sort of has evolved, right? It's the same kind of approach that I think we're seeing with generative AI to some degree. However, I think the characteristic of being able to disseminate and reason what is really relevant for you as a person, as a technologist, as a doctor, as a physician, as a nurse, as a construction worker, as a machine operator, as a pilot, becomes really, really critical. And I think instead of looking at the core set of jobs or tasks, less than jobs, I would say tasks that we see humans performing, we are going to challenge ourselves as human beings to think higher order of reasoning, to be able to differentiate and disseminate between information. I think we're already beginning to see AI being used in elections, for example, right, which affects every single human being, at least that is eligible to vote, and can make or break or change the direction of countries. So to me, being able to assess what information I'm being provided, is it true, is it not true, does it match my beliefs, my values, and then being able to assess that is a skill that I never thought about when I was reading the New York Times every single day, which I still do, by the way. I still have the newspaper that I subscribe, and I actually get physical newspaper that I read. But it's not the same today as it was 20 years ago. And I think, to me, that is a skill that we all have to learn, and some of it needs to be taught. And the way it gets taught is by getting exposure to the kinds of technologies that you're talking about.
Yesterday, I was talking with a fellow from LinkedIn. He's fantastic. I think we're going to have a clip someday about it. And one of the things that he was saying that really resonated with me is how what becomes more important is the human part, and now ever more so, the learning to learn, the being a prompt engineer, MD. You're going to be our example for the rest of the conversation, I think. The constantly pushing yourself, and it may not be so much on the technical skills, but the reinventing yourself continuously to something new.
I think it's super interesting, and you brought education as an example, and some of the transformational power that AI has. And I was in a discussion with a law firm about lawyers, their education, and their trades. And if you think about a lawyer, and I help a couple of them. I was engaged to a lawyer, so I know I helped on their exams, etc. So I remember one of the most important traits that I couldn't believe, me studying engineering at that time, was that she had to memorize tons of information. First thing. The second one was being able to properly summarize that and derive conclusions out of that, all of which a RAG system, does very well. So we were talking with this law firm about, this actually transformed like 80% of what we do. And the way we've been training our lawyers, and by the way, I remember I was part of that, calculator, no calculator. I was part of that. And at some point, the excuse being used why not to use a calculator was, well, you will not have a calculator at your at all times, all moments in time. So it is important for you to manage that. And that is so not true. I mean, today. So I think there's this is only one example. One example. Even med school, they do a lot of memorizing tons and tons of information. So you apply that to all the specialties, and you think about, well, based out of this technology, knowledge, etc., how should it be in the future, and how do I start making the changes for that to happen? And that's a conversation that needs to happen like now.
I can maybe add something to that, and I think that's a great point, especially in heavily knowledge-based domains, be it law firms or hospitals, say clinicians, for example. I mean, the best use of their time and expertise, because these are going to be highly skilled resources that are going to always face more demand than supply. And their time being spent on the highest value activities like critical reasoning or engaging with someone in explaining things to somebody who doesn't understand, like we just call this in hospital setting, like a good bedside manners or explaining things and patient engagement. I think for these skills, this AI is going to be a big benefit. And now, when you look at similar patterns in history, actually it's very evident. Like you gave the example of calculators. When I was in college, in our education system, we were forced to use, even in engineering, log tables to do large multiplications. I don't know, some of you who have studied overseas, even in UK, I've heard, and that was not the best time of an engineering mind. I actually, yesterday when I was watching Oscars, Oppenheimer got a lot of Oscars, and in that movie is actually great because there are a lot of these little science trivia hidden. And any of you, I think, is a fan of Richard Feynman. He's one of the greatest physicists. He actually had a little role in that movie, although it's not shown clearly. There was a time when he's playing bongo, and there was a time one of the guys who looked at the explosion without the cover was him. But I was surprised, like, why is Richard Feynman not at the center stage in Oppenheimer? And it was because if you kind of really look at it, there's a book he wrote, surely you're joking, Mr. Feynman. And he talks a lot about his experiences at that time. His time was spent in doing calculations using punch cards on IBM supercomputer. Of A-grade physicist who could have contributed a lot more was spending most of his time doing calculations of the nuclear reaction. You can kind of play that out in today's day, that you have like experts who can contribute a lot more, but they're distracted into doing things that probably not worth their time.
But I'm going to be the devil advocate here. We have the Air Canada case. You are in a heavily regulated industry. Law is a very specific industry. What happens when these systems hallucinate? What do we do about that? Like, there's a lot of impact with that.
I mean, I can talk, yeah. So the responsible AI is going to play an important role. And some of the things I maybe talk out of our project experiences that, in the beginning, some of the projects, I think you mentioned summarization, we started doing that, and there are a couple of options available. There are two models we looked at. The first model we looked at, it was GPT-4, so we had access to some of the OpenAI models. And then we had a clinically trained model. This was pre-Gemini on Google, MedPalm. And it was interesting that MedPalm is fine-tuned on all the corpus of medical literature to the point that it does better than 90% of actual doctors when it takes the USMLE test. And if you let that model sort of run, the model is taught to come up with, the infer things. And it does that. Now, you may want to call it hallucination because if you present it a bunch of data and say, okay, what do you think about it? It is going to think about it.
Yeah, but that's not the one I'm referring to. Like, the one that is tricky is when you have precedents that are not real precedents, and that happened.
So I think hallucination, to me, is a side effect that we have to address. But just back in, if some of you are familiar with the older data science where you have false positives and false negatives, and you can't solve both of them at the same time. You generally call it a precision and recall trade-off, meaning you try to control one, the other one opens up. There is a similar problem with hallucination and omission in the generative AI world. The only difference is, so back 5 years ago, when you do a deep learning model, you would generally get a confidence score. So you can engineer around it. Generative AI hallucinates confidently. So you don't get a confidence score. And that's where I think a lot of, so one of the design principles we have in our case is we always have a human in the loop. The decisions and the accountability is always with a medical expert. And AI is only playing the role of someone that is helping them get the right data at the right spot for the right patient. That basically is a helper or assistant that they always wanted but never had. But we are not letting AI make any decisions. And I'm sure FDA is going to probably come up with some guidelines at some point to do that as well.
I think it's a super interesting point that the Copilot model, which we will see more and more coming. But still, we need to overcome. There's a lot of times where clients are asking about, well, you know what happened with Air Canada in an AI incorrectly doing a refund or communicating that they had like a free cancellation up to 48 hours before the trip, which was not true. Just thought about it and it sounded correctly.
It sounded logical.
Yes, it was totally logical, but it wasn't like that. But it created like a big deal. It wasn't about the actual problem. Nothing happened. It was $500, but there was a lot of fuss around it. Also, there is this case about a Ford dealership where a user tricked an AI into selling him a truck for $1, which is totally interesting. So lots of clients are asking about, well, this could be, I mean, I know that, selling a truck for $1 might be I don't know, funny, but we have airlines as clients. What if we do maintenance recommendations through AI and this happens? That's not a joke. I mean, what can we do about it? And there's a lot of technology coming around, like NVIDIA has guardrails where you can limit the domain of the conversation. Then you have functions where you can turn an AI system into something that's deterministic. But the system become more and more complex, of course, and difficult to implement, which is what we're going through these days. I think that's a valid discussion. This is something that it's really important and matters today. We have ways of solving things today that are maybe not as straightforward as I would like to, but I think that will improve a lot in the years to come.
I think there's one thing that you said there, Diego, which to me is critical and key, which is the word used was deterministic. I think as humans, we are so used to deterministic systems now for decades, if not centuries or longer, that I think all we have looked at is for any system to be very specific. If we look at a direction, it's either the east or the west or the north or the south. It doesn't change. If you look at adding two numbers, it's 2 plus 3, very likely always going to be 5, right? Unless you ask Freud or another philosopher, it's very likely always going to be 5. If if I'm talking to you, then I am talking to you. I'm not talking to you. So if you take the probabilistic views of where the fundamentals of AI has started, right? I mean, if you boil down and ask the question about, so what is AI? What are we really doing here? To me, it is about predicting the next word or the next thing in a sequence is really what AI's core, at its core, is really trying to do. So if I'm saying a sentence, can you predict what the next word that I'm going to say? If you're talking about a diagnosis, sort of what is the next thing that is going to come? Now, when you add multiple tuples of words, when you add images, when you add paragraphs and sections and data sets and all of that, now you become more and more and more, to your point, complex. But if you now think about the prediction, even as humans, we hallucinate all the time, right? I mean, there is no predicting for certain as to what any of us is actually going to say here on the stage, as an example.
But I would feel entitled to call you out.
Absolutely.
And I don't have that tool to call out the AI.
So when you say you don't have well, you could. So this is where I talked about earlier about implementing these systems in a place where you're actually solving problem with or without humans in the loop. In certain cases, you have humans in the loop. In other cases, you don't have humans in the loop. In certain cases, you have multiple levels of humans in the loop. Why do we as humans think about a hierarchical system where you have, an approver, and then a manager approver, and then another manager approver, and then each manager has a certain set of range to which they are allowed or entitled or eligible to approve certain things. Any decision is what I'm talking about. To me, I think we are at the early stages of building that into an AI-driven workflow system. I think we are still at the stages of trying to get these systems sort of to perform and understand the capabilities that it has before you determine, do you need another approver on top? And that approver could be a human, could be multiple humans, or it could be yet another AI system, right? Or it could be another deterministic system that you can apply. This is where, as you start looking at RAGs and being able to sort of apply more rule-based sort of approaches on top of that, these are all various techniques of bringing some of these things to life. So I think hallucination is the first stage. If I hire an employee, I think I know what their background is. I think I've interviewed them and I put them at a certain level. 2 months later, I might realize that they're actually performing 3 levels better. It's possible. Or a level below. And I think that is a decision and a judgment that I'm making. It's the same thing I would think applies for many of the AI systems. So I think we're at the beginning stages of applying AI to solve problems, whether it's generative AI or others. And it is these aspects of how do you incorporate these things in a workflow so that it actually truly solves the problem with the most efficient and the most effective path, and of course, the least expensive path. So it's when you start putting all of these things in combination, I think this is the journey that we're realizing right now. Now, on top of that, you mentioned, Mangesh, the term regulation. I think regulation, ethics, comes around that, comes on top of that, right? I mean, this is how, if you think about a corporate, how do you do HR policies? How do you do customer policies?
Don't you think it usually comes a bit late, though?
It does. I think it does, but the time span, but regulation always follows adoption, right? I mean, and trails adoption sometimes by decades. So, you know, since we are talking a lot about medical field, back in the 16th century, the best surgeons were barbers, right? Or 15th century, the best surgeons were barbers. Now, after they were applying their barbaric skills to performing actually very good precision surgery, regulations sort of started coming after the fact, right? So sometimes it could take decades, if not 100+ years to do that. I think that time window between when you see adoption happening at scale and regulation that needs to come is fast shrinking now to a point where it is not even a decade, right? It is a small number of years. So if we don't start thinking about the ethics and the policies and the regulations now, you're never going to be able to catch up, right? So that's why I think it's important to do that right now.
Yeah. So we have about 20 minutes left, and I think it's very important to go back to a positive note, because sometimes you get kind of bogged down with all the negatives. We have our resident gaming lover. We have an ex-Disney. What is AI doing for creativity? What are we going to see there that you think is going to blow us out of this world?
Well, you asked me for this, so so I think there's been like I've been in the gaming industry, related to the gaming industry for quite some time, and you know, at some point the industry started talking about, you know, the crossover, but then the intersection between gaming and entertainment and the movies industry, and there were, you know, clear interactions there. And you see these days, just as an example, an engine that was born out of the gaming community, Unreal Engine, is being used for creating, you know, effects and CGI for a lot of very good quality movies. But it's not just about the technology. It's about the expectation of the consumers, you know, the gamers and the people that sit on a theater and consumes and sees a movie. And you've all seen Sora, right? What it can do. So movies for a long time has been, you know, zero interaction. You just get, you know, you just sit it and saw what something wanted you to see. And it was all about, you know, the storyline. It was all about the director, how he captured emotions, etc. And it's great. It's awesome. People are demanding different things. So I see a future, clearly a future, with a crossover between what we understand as gaming today and the movies industry. I see the movies industry go into a direction where, you know, it's much more important to recreate a story where the people has the opportunity to have interactions and even modify that script. And you see games, for all of you game players, that are much more like a movie. In fact, there's a ton of, if you go to YouTube, there's a ton of movies that are created with the cinematics of a game. Like all the cutscenes of the game make up a full movie, like 90 minutes movie. So So I see a lot of things happening there, positive things, and I see technology as enablers for that because costs are not as high with things such as Sora, as an example. And I'm not saying that Sora necessarily applies today, but it gives you a sneak peek of what can be achieved.
It would be actually interesting to see. So the last benchmark for that, so Pixar was the first one to build a animated movie truly, and in 1986, so in Pixar logo you have that lamp. It's called Luxo Junior, and Pixar first made a 5-minute short film that they showed in SIGGRAPH. That was in 1986. And it took them 10 years to make Toy Story after that. So, I mean, we'll have to see, like, whatever was 1986 Luxo lamp is what Sora is now. You see a glimpse of what it can do, and let's see how many years it will take for a full-length movie from this point.
You know, I was at the Paramount CTO's talk as well, and one of the things, he's showing a lot of things that they're doing. It was amazing. It was super inspiring, but one of the biggest takeaways for me from that meeting, from that talk, was that he was saying that they're a content company. Technology serves the content. So everything they're doing in AI is towards content, not towards productivity, not towards efficiency. It's towards the heart of what the company is. And I think that's an amazing takeaway for any company trying to focus on how to use technology, how to embed this, where to think about this. Because if you go to the cost-saving thing, sometimes it's not going to be where you get the most bang for your buck or where you see the best results, right?
I do agree. I think I will come back to the content, but I did want to provide a counterpoint to what you both said on gaming and entertainment. It was funny, I also saw parts of the Oscar last night, and it was fascinating to me was one comment that I haven't researched this myself, but I think it was a statement that Jimmy Kimmel, the host, made, where I believe he said that Christopher Nolan still writes on a computer that is not connected to the internet, does not use a smartphone, and he still directs and makes amazing movies. So I think there's opportunities for all kinds. I think it is very encouraging to hear that as well. But on the core of the content, this is exactly what I meant earlier when I talked about disrupting yourself. Every job, you also disrupt yourself and redefine yourself as a company. While only a few years ago, all of these movie companies were exactly that. They were in the entertainment business. They were in the movie production business. I think probably one of the credits to that goes to Netflix, probably being one of the early pioneers of sort of starting out as a technology company that is providing and offering. When they switched to sort of focus on streaming, to me, they became a content company. And their content was all about entertainment, consumers, and the intersection of the two. So I think if you look at the last probably 18 years or so now, every one of the entertainment companies have become that, right? It's actually been a process in the making that now I think they're all declaring. But it is, and you are at Disney, so you probably have a lot more insight into this, Mangesh. But I think, to me, that is a great example of that. If you look at, workflow and companies that are in the data business, they don't talk about data because it is becoming more table stakes. And now they're going higher order into saying, how are we actually solving your problems using applications with technologies like AI? So I think this is an evolution and a redefinition that we're going to continue to see over the years across the board.
No, I was going to make a comment because I think we talk a lot about, from the industry to the consumer. But we need to understand that in a lot of occasions, the vast majority, the consumers are actually creating the traction of the company. So they are driving, what the company should be doing. And I think this wave changes consumer behavior a lot and their expectation. And let me give you an example of this. I think, just as an example, I think, search engines days are over. The way we know it, they're over. And if you see the Bing experience today with OpenAI behind it, etc., it's super interesting the way you can consume information and crawl the web and get access to that information. I think Google has been introducing this concept slowly. Like if you go to Google, like a couple of years ago, you go to Google and ask, how old is, this actor, you get the answer and the reference to that answer. So it's slowly studied, but it's a much more intelligent way of doing things. Similarly to that, there's a lot of, the moment a company gives you a customer support that is unlike the traditional chatbots, it will actually set consumer expectation to a whole different level. And let me ask you this. How long until Alexa starts sounding dumb? How long? I mean, you've interacted.
It already
exactly.
does.
I know. I didn't want to say it myself, but that's true. I mean, you go to ChatGPT and you have a level of interaction that it's amazing, and you go, and Alexa, it's not that bad. I mean, I don't go to Siri, and 90% of the time is, let me Google that for you. That's the answer you get. And I think consumer expectation will drive a lot of that change. And the velocity, the speed of that change will happen according to those consumers.
Before you make your point, Mangesh, because we're almost out of time, after Mangesh goes, we'll do a final round, and you are welcome to ask questions so that they line up.
I was going to actually ask you that. So I think the limitations and the shifting, how do you see it from a product perspective, right? Because ultimately it boils down to product design with AI in mind. Some call it like AI first approach to product design, but now you're going to have both deterministic and probabilistic services happen in the same app or whatever is that form factor. How do you think about it as a product officer?
I don't know if we have exactly how things are going to be yet. Like we're still in the process of figuring things out, pretty much like everybody. But I do think we're going to go towards 5, probably 10 at the most years from now. We're going to be at the extremes, either completely transparent technology where the interactions are seamless, the humane pin, everything that is this sort of action models that are walking with you and predicting everything you will do, or the fully immersive. We did not talk, we could be talking here for a much longer time. We did not talk about Vision Pro. We did not talk about all of the immersive experiences that are going to be there. We didn't talk about social justice. There's a ton of things to talk about. I think those extremes are going to be stronger and more prevalent year after year. So as we're designing products, as we're building experiences, we're thinking about those extremes. How is this path taking me there and taking me to, for the most part, is usually reducing the friction even more and more to get it to that extra level.
I think it's like your ad.
A little bit.
Lick the phone and then lick the fries and see if it tastes the same, right?
Okay, with that on this side, we're done. But let's go to our first question since we have someone there.
It appears to me that Congress and media is mortally afraid of artificial intelligence. I hear congressional hearings, they kind of shut this Frankenstein monster and chain it down in a dungeon. I've not heard this. I'm old enough to say that. This did not happen when internet was introduced. This did not happen when the mainframe computers were introduced. Why this fear of AI?
Do you guys want to take it?
Well, I'll tell you that there has always been, it's a great question. I think every time a new change has been brought on, there has actually always, historically, right, I would say over the last 10,000 years, been some form of a resistance to that. The difference right now is the fact that there is a much bigger and faster platform that we have available where the information and these differences are being disseminated fast enough. So the world is a stage, right, as Shakespeare said, and now we all voice our opinions and we can all have our own followings. So I think there are bound to be some of these polarized opinions and views that have always been there, but they're now just taking more center stage along with the believers and the opposers. So I think, to me, the way that I would look at this is really find a way to believe. I mean, this is here to stay. It's not going away. And take the first step and start, right, would be kind of my view. And I think that will sort of erode over time. It's just something that is really following a precedent that has been around for us as humans all along.
I think to add on top of that, I think that for a long time, humanity has been accustomed to know that machines could be stronger than us, machine could be faster than us, machine could do a lot of different jobs a lot more efficiently. But speaking about smarter, speaking about creativity, that's not something we're accustomed or willing to let go, mentally speaking. That a machine can do something that's so human as creating. That's very strong. So I think there's a lot of what you mentioned about the reaction that humanity has against AI that comes that way. Otherwise, let's just put a concrete example. Autonomous driving as an example. The day that the Tesla had an accident and a person died because of that, it was, you read all over the place, we should rule this, that cannot happen. Everyone was on top of that. How many times we see that happening from humans that are drunk? And we're used to that. We can live with that. We can live with a human making a mistake, on a surgery, but we cannot deal with the same if a machine is the one making the decisions. Even though the machine is proven to be, 90% more effective than a human in that certain case. So I think just to add to what you said, because those are paradigms that will be falling. It's just a matter of time. But I think today we're in the transition. So I can see why that happens. It's just a matter of time.
We have another question.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, we've seen with the mass adoption of ChatGPT a leap into artificial intelligence being used by the common public, but we've seen also a lot of errors, hallucinations that have been in the press. What do you think is going to be the next step that we're going to see, and what's needed to get there? What's going to be the next shift for the common user on that experience?
Yeah, maybe I could take that. I think on the existing state of technology, we did talk about hallucinations earlier. And there is a data science solution to that is at play, and there's an engineering solution to that at play. So RAG that you mentioned, the retrieval augmented generation, is basically what you do as trust but validate. So the example he used is, hey, you hire an intern, and you really don't quite trust the intern to do a scale job. So every time the intern comes and suggests something, you're going to show me the proof. Which is what RAG is. It's basically a way for AI to show you the proof and provenance of where the data came from. But on the same time, there are some of the latest research that is happening, which is actually putting that process in the middle of training the model itself. Meaning every time you're training a large language model, and this is something that big techs will do, not every company, but showing the proof will be ingrained into the model. This is like you are training the intern and you're asking them questions while they're learning, so that a year from now, they will be able to do the job on their own without need for a validation. And I do think that that will happen. I think the hallucinations will be in control. I would think the next frontier for this is going to be AGI, where right now we're still in the narrow AI. Even with ChatGPT, it's still a bit of a task-based. But over time, I think the intern's job or the job would be done by the AI, and you got to give some liberty to AI to be able to do that, where it's got to get a little scrappy to work your way around. There are two really good, actually, packages that are out there. There is one called AutoGPT. So it's an open source code built on GPT-4, and it's on GitHub, so you can go look at. It can actually figure out how to connect to internet on its own. So it's given a job to connect to the internet, and it's not programmed. It just figures out how to do it. And then you can give it a goal, and then it will figure out how to do it. There's another one called Baby AGI, which is also pretty smart.
Well, as you can tell, this is very interesting. We could stay here even longer, but our time is up. We want to thank South by Southwest for having us here. It was amazing, and I definitely want to thank my dates, because basically you were my 3 dates today. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.